because he wanted to get on 2K. And we found a library that does work with them on a periodic basis. He sent them a pitch within a week. He got in.
This is Xjwill. He's gotten his music used by some of the top brands in the industry and is one of the most influential educators in the sync licensing space. This episode of the podcast, he shares some of his most actionable steps in sync licensing and even shares current trends going on in the sync licensing industry.
Ooh, that's a good question.
I'm your host, XcaliberZero, a full-time musician building his own sync licensing library, and welcome to The Realm.
Okay, first of all, I'll have to slide you your 20 under the virtual table later. That was an amazing introduction, and thanks for letting me be on the interview show. But like my name's Josh Williams. I have been doing sync for about 6-7 years now, give or take. I specialize in making orchestral, like trailerized orchestral hip hop music, also pop, and sound design is more of the things I like to like focus on as far as my niche. What other things about me? I'm signed to a lot of different publishing companies.
Nice.
And yeah, always trying to stay busy. I've been teaching since I was like 16. I originally started in music at 11 playing trumpet, and by the time I was about 16 years old, I was showing younger kids how to do what I was doing. So I've always like had a knack for sharing information and things of that nature. So yeah.
Nice. And speaking of trumpet, I did some research on you. I saw your trumpet's name's Tamar.
Yeah.
I thought that was hilarious when I saw that. That's tight. And then
I gave it. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You go ahead.
No, I was just saying I gave it a name because the one that I got was supposed to. So it's a long story, but long story short, my parents, in order to, I came from an inner city, low income neighborhood, and my parents invested a lot of money to get me that horn. So I named it for my mom, because my mama, she was saving that money to buy a refrigerator with a lock on it.
Oh wow.
So, because I grew up with brothers, and so like we're all like always in the fridge and going in and out and stuff, and so she was planning on doing that, but my dad went and got that a pro horn for me, and like instead I named it after I named it Tamar because there's no other girls in the house. So
okay Tamar. Okay, yeah. I read that and I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I also saw that you traveled abroad to study, and then you also performed in like I think Japan for trumpet, right?
Yep. I toured with a bunch of different different acts and artists from after high school into college, and did the thing. Like I tried to be a rock star, because when you pick up an instrument, that's what you want to do, right? And so that's eventually what led me to sync.
Nice. So how has that transition to sync kind of impacted your life, and how long did it really take you to kind of go full time with sync licensing?
Oh, that's a great question. So it took me about 18 months to get my first placement. But the reasoning behind that was because there just wasn't enough information publicly available that I could really grind to. But the 100%. Reason I got into sync before all that happened was just because I had done the touring. I was able to go to school for music, right? I was gigging every weekend, but I still felt broke. You know what I mean? Right. As a jazz musician, I was making new compositions and writing new music all the time. Even like on the fly when we're improvising and stuff like that. The problem was that like I'd literally be working every weekend. I couldn't go hang out with friends or be with family. The touring thing was fun, but eventually after I hit about 26, it got kind of old, just because you're eating bar food and stuff every day, and you're having to deal with a lot of different personalities. You're kind of locked in the car. You know what I mean?
100%.
And when I got done with touring, long story short, I went to a concert that one of my old faculty members at the college I went to was playing. He invited me to, and yeah, I was like, all right, bring some friends and go check you out. Especially because I was trying to get back into the gig scene. You have to be seen in order to network and create more work for yourself. So eventually, I think it was during an intermission, I go out to the foyer and I open up a pamphlet, and this guy's got, I realized that it's not just any concert, it's a benefit concert because he couldn't pay his health insurance.
Oh, snap.
And so I was just like, yo, like I need to figure out how to do this because my future awaits. You know what I'm saying?
Right. 100%.
So that's how I got into publishing. That's how most artists and just musicians in general actually make a living off of their art without having to tour. And so eventually that's how I kind of found sync licensing, was through, okay, if you own your publishing, you're writing new music all the time, those royalties and things would come in. And so that's how I kind of got into it.
100%. After you see that first check come in for sync licensing, like, oh, hold up. This is actually, this is something right here. People are not talking about this. So what placement has meant the most to you in your sync career so far? I know you talk about the Taco Bell commercial being the first one. Is that the most impactful one of your career so far? Or which one are you like the most proud of right now?
Right now, Taco Bell's always going to be that's your first, so that holds a special place in my heart. But at the moment, the most impactful one for me was being able to have the privilege to score a short episode for Apple. They have I did something for them last year where basically they have these short series on new products that they have. And I did one on Procreate, which is an iPad app, and they specialized for like house/hip hop, because they shot it in Chicago at the big glass one that they have downtown. And so it was cool because I used to go back and forth to Chicago. I'm from St. Louis. So I used to go back and forth to Chicago all the time as a kid. And so I really felt connected to the project because they wanted to try to make sure it was as authentic as possible. And nice. So getting a chance to like hit up some of my friends from Chicago and make sure that it was exactly what was needed for that project was really, really fun. And that was one of my biggest goals when I first got into it, was maybe landing some type of placement with an Apple product or with Nike or something like that. So to this day, that's my favorite at the moment.
Nice, man. You're like one of the people that really kind of opened my eyes, because we started posting. I feel like I ran across you. We're around the same like time frame as far as creating content for sync licensing. And it was cool because you had a different perspective than what I was used to. I have a lot of background in TV shows and a little bit of film, and I have like one ad on a wine commercial with something very small. But when you started posting, you had like a different perspective, and most of your content was about like ads, like doing stuff for Taco Bell and Apple and stuff like that. And have you had experience with TV as well, or reality TV? And then if so, which one do you prefer getting? Because I feel like now my focus is a little bit more trying to get towards the ads, because I realize it's like a whole nother playing field. And I feel like the production quality has to be a lot higher. So have you had experience with both, and which one do you prefer?
I have had more experience with advertisements just because the library that I first got into, that's what they specialized in. So I'm trained to think that way when it comes to making creating music, because sometimes there's a different arc, right? But when it comes to I got my royalty statement this past week from BMI, and looking at the reality TV shows, I'm like, you know what? I should do more of this. This is kind of nice.
Yeah, for sure.
It takes a little longer to get paid from reality TV shows and TV shows in general. So I kind of lean more towards the ad side of thing, just because normally those brands, we're working with $1 trillion companies. They already have the money set aside, and the ROI for that commercial is already set so high that they normally have the money on hand for you already.
100%.
And there's also other special things like demo fees and custom projects that come out of the ad department. Also, it's strike proof. So when I went full time with doing sync licensing, it was during the lockdown, believe it or not. And so Hollywood was actually shut down, but I was making more placements because of the fact that people were still selling stuff like toilet paper commercials, Aveeno commercials.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff that was still going on. So despite movies and television shows, or scripted television shows weren't working at that moment in time, I was still able to find a revenue stream through this industry to kind of work. And reality TV is the same way. I think that was one of the reasons why it boomed so much in the early 2010s, was because of a strike, and they didn't have any scripts to use or with actors to use, so they went to reality television.
100%. Yeah, I'm glad actually you touched on that. That wasn't one of the questions I was going to ask, but I'm glad you touched on that, because right now we are seeing a strike with writers and actors, and it is affecting obviously the sync license industry. But I'm sure you feel the same way. We support them 100%, especially going for after what's fair, especially with dealing with AI and stuff like that. But what you said was something very important, is that you kind of shifted and kind of had the intuition to realize like, okay, reality TV or this lane might not be working, but right now these lanes are, more prominent and more in demand. Or reality TV is working, sorry, but these lanes are a little bit more in demand. Scripted
Mhm.
series may be slowing down, but I can focus on advertisements or sports placements is another one. News every day, the news is airing. That's another lane. So there's
Yep.
a lot of different lanes within sync licensing. So I'm glad you touched on that. I actually want to circle back too to something you mentioned before. As someone who is unfamiliar with what a demo fee is, when you do an advertisement, there's a demo fee. We don't have that with the reality TV. Can you explain what that is?
So essentially, what a demo fee is they a company will basically they have a brief, right, and they say, hey, we need it to sound like this. You have these parameters to kind of to work in between, and for your time, essentially, to send us a demo within a certain time frame, we'll pay you a couple $100 for whatever you come up with. And normally, you will get these kind of demo fees on custom jobs.
Mm,
Um, and it's normally what I've seen. It's normally in the advertising space because again, they have the money to kind of work with these kinds of things because it's already there. You know what I'm saying? Versus a
right.
television show that maybe that hasn't premiered yet. They don't know if it's going to be a soaring hit or just a flop. So sometimes there's a little more volatility there. But normally that's when you have demo fees. Sometimes they pay per song. Like so sometimes with certain briefs, I try to send at least one or two different options that they can choose from if I have the time to write. And so sometimes they send it a demo fee just for that one brief or per song that you send. So it just
Oh,
depends on
nice.
the budget and things of that nature.
Yeah, that's something that I haven't really experienced. So it's cool hearing that. I've never experienced that, but that seems like paying you for your time. Like, why not? That it makes you
Yeah,
makes it
it
more
just makes
incentivized.
sense, right?
Right, exactly. 100%. So if we have someone right now who's starting to listen to this interview between you and they just are finding out about sync licensing for the first time, what is an actionable step that they can take today to find companies to submit to?
Um, the first thing I would probably do, and I'm sure you've heard this a million times already, is you have to research. You have to understand exactly what the market needs at this moment in time. So, for instance, there was an article that came out maybe 2 or 3 days ago that was mentioning that hip hop is actually 25% of the most streamed things on Spotify right now, but it's
Mm,
not the top. The
right.
top right now is Afrobeat and I can't remember. I think the other is just Latin music. So because of that, it's like, oh, okay. So maybe I should start instead of just watching TV, listen to TV. Figure out
Mm,
what's actually working with companies and brands because normally one of the top questions that I get on all social media platforms is what kind of music is trending right now. It's like it's
mm.
literally yelling at us in the face. So next time you see an ad, like don't skip it, like listen for a minute and see what's going on, and that'll give you hints as far as what music libraries, when you do your research later, are needing and looking for, so that when you set up a pitch or an offer for your catalog, you can let them know I've been watching and listening to the industry. I know that this is something that you could need. And if you come with that approach of wanting to provide value or offer a service, you're normally going to have a lot more success.
100%. One of the things that I remember me and you kind of talked about, me and Josh actually met at NAM. So if you're not familiar with NAM, it's a convention center and they have different panelists. And shout out to the homie DeFingers, but he brought us on as well as a few other creatives in the sync space to have a sync panel. And one of the things that me and Josh talked about, and he kind of like really went to depth about, was research. And the fact that he just explains to you exactly what he's looking for, what trends he's looking for, exactly how to actually approach these libraries is something that is so slept on. A lot of people just think that they can take their catalog that they have of just beats that are sitting on their beat store and just start pitching it. But you got to really understand the market and what it demands. So I'm really glad that you honed in on that because I feel like it's very important to understand. It's not really, I feel like people are always looking for the answer, and that's like one of the main ones is just going
Hmm.
out there, doing the research, going against the libraries or sync agency's catalog, listening to what they don't have or what they lack in, and then really providing that sound and be that go-to person. So yeah, thank you for elaborating on that.
Oh yeah.
So being an educator in the sync space, what are some of the biggest fears or setbacks you see musicians who have that are getting started in sync? Like, what are your students kind of, having trouble with? They're setting up a wall for themselves before getting started with sync or on their journey to sync licensing.
It's for me personally, what I've seen a lot of my students kind of struggle with, it's all head games because normally when they get chosen for the program, they already know how to make decent music. You know what I'm saying? So the music's never the problem. It's just pitching. I had a client actually, he's been part of our program in like community for like a year and a half, and he has a catalog of like 300 songs. He'd come in every week with a new song, and we listen to it and be like, hey, this is amazing, you should start pitching this. And he just too like I don't know if it was just validation that he needed or something like that, but 7 months go by, he actually starts pitching, and within a week he's signed to a library.
Oh my goodness.
Exactly with what he wanted, as far because he wanted to get on 2K, the next video game that's coming out in like 2 months. And we found a library that does work with them on a periodic basis. He sent them a pitch within a week, he got in. So it's just like, sometimes what I think is the biggest thing holding us back is ourselves. Like, what does Gretzky say? Like, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. But you will make a lot more of them if you kind of get your pitch together and make sure it's curated to serve the library as best as you can. If you make their job easier, you're going to end up with more work. It's just the way it is. So the thing holding most people back is kind of just not, or I guess maybe being afraid to pitch and that rejection.
100%. I think that I see that too as well with students. I think they have this like big idea of what these companies do, and they're just like way above what they are. But if you come in the game educating yourself and understanding how to approach these companies, they're going to take you seriously. And at the end of the day, you're providing them value. You're providing them music. You know, they need your music to be able to pitch and to be able to support their own company. So if you come in there with that mindset and that confidence, you're going to take over. That's crazy that his first placement that he pitched out for, it's 2K. That's like a swinging for the fences moment, but you have to really be like, you know, that's a crazy story. So something I remember we talked about this, but something that I respect about you though, for what you do for the sync community and being an educator, is your work ethic. Is your work ethic educating the community while still composing for sync, which is not really easy. So there's there's some sync educators out there who like completely stopped creating for sync just to teach about sync licensing. So how do you stay disciplined to keep that consistency of creativity while educating?
One simple phrase: wake up earlier. I mean, honestly, just because it's very hard to do both. To make content, make sure I'm still providing for the clients and students that I have already. And then again, like I was mentioning before, I have like a lot of publishing companies that I'm signed to. So what I try to do, something that sticks out to me when I was in college, was I had teachers that were asking for me to basically transcribe or mimic what they were doing, but they weren't out in the field anymore. So like, in order for me to teach as effectively as possible, I need to still be doing it. You know what I mean? So that's what drives me. So I try to do all my creative work for writing music in the morning when there's no interruptions. A lot of us have families, so it's great to maybe do that first. That way, when it comes to honey-do lists and things of that nature, when everybody wakes up at about 8, I've already I'm up one song already. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so I have specific days that I'll try to like categorize for, okay, today's going to be a content day, or today's going to be an editing day. And just knowing your limitations on what you can and cannot finish is really important too. Sometimes you might say yes to a deadline that you realistically can't make, and now you're stressed out and everybody's suffering because now you're trying to do all the things at once, and you kind of have to understand when and where you need help. So like, for instance, with the community that we run, I have a community manager to help me with the students and make sure everyone has what they need. Or like my wife is my video editor for a lot of stuff. So doing stuff like that kind of helps to make sure that I can still continue to focus on music.
Right. 100%. That's cool. You're outsourcing and then getting more done, building an empire at that point when you're doing stuff like that. So that's cool. And, you know, the reason why I touch on that is because a lot of people do have a full-time job. They do have that 9 to 5 where they're working and they're still trying to pursue music. And it's hard because I feel like for us creators, especially for music, there's so many different avenues to take, and we're trying to figure out what's the next best thing that's going to work. There's trends, right? You know, there's loop games, beat selling, there's sync licensing, all these different areas. So, you know, really having that clarity and finding that one lane is very important, and taking the time out to kind of set aside that creativity block every single day to really push yourself and like have those steps towards your goal is super important. So it's cool to have your perspective. I remember you posting content and showing that you were actually getting up at 4 a.m. I believe, or something like that, and actually,
Hmm.
you set that time aside to work, and I feel like that's super important. It's hard to do. It takes a lot of discipline to do that. So I commend you for that. It's something that I very much so respect. So moving on to music, because this is we talk about sync licensing a lot, but we don't talk about the music a lot. One of your taglines that you have, which I think is brilliant, is follow if you want to make your music sound expensive. What are your top two go-to plugins to keep your tracks sounding expensive?
Ooh, that's a good question. Okay, so top plugins that I really gravitate towards for making music. So, and let me define expensive first. Expensive to me sounds like it's intentional, right? So,
Mm,
it means there's a lot involved with sound design and then making things feel rich with harmonics.
mm.
So one of the plugins that I go to all the time for mastering even is the Cradle's God Particle.
Okay, yeah.
It's really helpful for making sure it's actually like a self check to my mix to make sure I have exactly I'm hitting the right markers when it comes to compression and things of that nature. So that's
Mhm.
cool. Um, the other plugin that I always end up using is Contact. I don't, and let
Yep.
me know if this is a cop out or not. But like, in order for your music to sound legit, you need real sounding instruments, right?
Hmm.
So having really high quality samples to pull from to make sure that you're emoting the things that you need is really important. Like for today, for instance, I have to make a video on. I did a video maybe 2 days ago about making some music for the NFL.
Yeah.
And a lot of people were asking like what brass sounds I was using. I was using
Hmm.
Contact, but specific libraries that I've found and customized myself. Again, intentional sound design, making them sound the way I want them to be, is really important because now I have a sonic fingerprint on exactly, okay, anytime you hear this brass, you know it's mine. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So I think that's where the level of production kind of elevates is when you're using those kinds of tools intentionally.
100%. Yeah, I think it's super important to have sound selection, especially when you're using instruments that are supposed to sound organic. Like that's one of
Yeah.
the most important. And if you do reviews too as well, I'm sure when you hear a lot of musicians submit their music and it sounds a little bit synthetic when it's supposed to sound a little bit more organic, that's usually the reason why it's a sound selection. And it's hard because there's so many different plugins out there that you
And
want
they're
to invest
expensive.
into. Yeah.
Hmm.
Luckily, a lot of them are moving kind of towards like that. That
Membership
yeah,
subscription route. Yeah.
which is not great for your pockets in the long run. But if you're like short on cash, I highly recommend you kind of invest into some of these instruments because it'll change like the whole dynamic of the track.
They
And
pay themselves off.
yeah, exactly, 100%. Yeah, you can definitely pay for a sound bank or a new VST with one royalty check or even one upfront fee depending on the placement. So it'll pay off in the long run for sure, and you can write it off.
Mhm.
So it's great. But it's funny that you said that note about the NFL content you posted the other day because I watched it and then I looked at the comments and I saw that one of the questions was brass and I'm like, what brass is he using? Was he using the trumpet? Like, what brass was he using there? Because it sounded very big and full. So it's cool that you do that. I don't really layer too much as far as like instruments like that. I use kind of more textures to kind of
Mhm.
really bring out the track. So it's cool to hear that different perspective of what techniques you use um for your tracks. So
Yeah, that comes from the sound design background. Normally with sound, and I'll just say this one thing. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you
no,
off.
no, no, go ahead.
Just something I'd love to share with sound design. You want to make sure that you have. I split it up into three different components. You have your bass, your mid range, and then your high. And if you have different sound sources for each one, when it all plays together and you mix them appropriately, it creates a new unique sound. So
Mm,
it's very I'll make a video about it, but it's very important that you kind of understand those things in order to again make something unique.
100%. And since you're saying you're making a video about it, we're gonna talk about a little bit more what you got going on later. But go ahead and plug where people can find some of your content if they're trying to look for that video.
Oh yeah, all things X or was it at XJ underscore Will is where you can
Okay.
find me on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, all the things.
Definitely. You got some gems out there, so I definitely recommend you checking them out. So, on the topic of sync licensing, what are some of the new trends that you're seeing within the sync industry? For example, like a few months ago, a lot of the requests that I was getting was inspired by the HBO show White Lotus. So, are there any trends
Mhm.
like that that you're seeing within sync licensing, or is there anything that you really have your eye on right now with music?
That's a good question. At the moment, everyone's kind of tipping around the eggshells of AI, which is really
Mm,
interesting. So, what I've been trying to do as far as with trends is finding ways to implement it into music production. Also, when it comes to um, generative music, the importance of branding is going to become much more apparent. 2 years ago, you didn't have to have any type of social media following at all in order to land placements. That's completely fine. But what I've been seeing, especially now that I'm working a little bit more with sync agents, is they're always in the brief. They're looking for an up and coming artist for
mm.
certain TV shows and things of that nature. So finding a way to humanize the music that you're pitching, whether that be when you have a disco link, making sure you have a nice put together picture. That kind of branding is going to make the perception of what you're offering to them before they even play anything of a higher quality. Okay. So, like, that's what I'm seeing in the market more so than anything is just making sure you have your business together and branding along with it.
100%. I could not agree more with that. I feel like presenting yourself as a professional is like one of the most impactful things right now you can do if you're pitching your music. Like coming off straight off the gate, having everything set up where you look like you've been doing this for a while and not just someone who just found a random link to find, submit to a music library and just copy and paste something. So yeah, I'm glad you
Yeah.
touched on that. So going back on that, I see you actually collaborating more with artists. I see that you dropped a project not too long ago with an artist. How do you find these collaborators, and are you open to collaborating with artists who are up and coming, who kind of build a following for themselves, or you kind of go out there and look for them yourselves?
Collaborating with artists is a interesting process for me just because I like working with artists that are already in sync so that there's not a lot of hand holding going on. We can make stuff a lot quicker.
Hmm.
Um, but it's normally a timing thing. So they might be busy with a project right now. So for instance, yeah, one of the projects we dropped, myself and um Masbo Q, amazing rapper. He's known as the rap scientist on TikTok, and we got together to create an EP. But now he's in touring season, so we can't work as much as we normally would. So like finding other artists that have the ability to the ability and time to understand what needs to happen is really really important for me. And then again, I'm normally this is yeah we're reaching the end of the month, so normally I'm wrapping up projects. So normally I'm reaching out to artists to collaborate with in the first of the month, so that like with other briefs and other publishing companies I'm with, I can kind of finish those projects before they're due. So normally
100%.
just reaching out earlier in the month is normally helpful.
For sure. And are you seeing more artist based projects being used? Or are you seeing more instrumental? Like a lot of questions I get usually is instrumental. Is the instrumentals are they still viable in sync licensing? Are you still seeing both kind of briefs coming in, or are you just seeing more artist driven projects now?
Oh, that's a good question. And it kind of refers back to one of the questions you had before, as far as with instrumentals still have more utility. But I wasn't going to let that be a hold on the what I can earn from sync licensing. So collaborating with artists was one of the goals I had this year, just to work with larger sync agencies and things of that nature. But I will say that making hook instrumentals, if you've ever heard of those before, where
Mm,
you don't have anything on the verses because normally those don't get synced anyway, unless it's a longer placement. But normally just having some type of good hook will normally elevate the amount of places that your instrumental quote unquote can be placed. So that's something that I would probably highly recommend doing if you have the time. And yeah.
100%. When I was working at the music library, something that we had was a genre called lyrical phrases, which is basically what you're saying. And it's just the hook part, which is usually used in a TV
Mhm.
show to cut up and use the hook. And it kind of is like referring back to what you're actually watching, is really matching the content. So let's say you're watching a reality TV show and the person is arguing with the other person and they break up. The music, most likely the lyrics are going to match up with that. And I feel like with artists right now, that's a great way to just kind of quickly knock out songs without having to put a whole bunch of effort of creating this whole masterpiece and just kind of have those hook placements. I just seen a placement. I think it was with Apple with Kara. I think it was with Co's
Oh
music.
yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, yeah, and all she said when in the entire track was confidence. She just said confidence like over and over. And it matched up with it was Walmart actually. It matched up with the placement
Mhm.
perfectly. So I feel like that's a great way for artists. If you're an artist listening to this, is like create those lyrical phrases, or what he called it, hookstrumentals, and then collaborate with these producers who are making that and kind of pitching them to sync. Because right now I feel like it is trending for a lot more vocalists being used. That's kind of what we're focusing on with
Mhm.
the library slash sync agency that I'm building. Is I really want to build up with artists, because I feel like it's becoming more and more prominent within the sync world. So it's cool that you touched on
People,
that.
yeah, people relate to the human voice. It's as simple as that. And like something else that I've found that holds a lot of artists back is that they're too wordy. Excalibur mentioned something that's extremely important when you're writing lyrics for sync, and that they need to be simple. Like, it's great that you can spit bars, but unfortunately, it's going over everybody's head or it's not being used in the first place. As you mentioned, Kara only says like 2 words the whole time,
Right.
but the rhythm, the pitch that she's using, and things of that nature help them sell their products. So it's obvious that simplicity is king.
100%. The example I always use is like, you're not trying to describe, let's say we're talking about the basketball hoop behind Xjwill's head right now. I'm not going to say right now I'm shooting buckets to a gold basket. Like, I'm going to be way more relative. Like right now, right now I'm making plays. That's way more broad and way more relatable. That could be used in a lot of different contexts as opposed to just one general area. So yeah, I'm glad you touched on that.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really good point. So
Sure.
you have an event coming up right now, hosted with the one and only Anthony Clint Jr., and you're really changing that dynamic. I feel like of what the industry, I would say what we see represented mostly in the industry. Can you talk about what you got going on? What's it called, and kind of the motive behind it, and how people can actually get signed up with what you have coming soon?
For sure. So, super excited to kind of, we announced it earlier this month. We've started a sync conference focused on BIPOC creators and individuals just in the space. It's called Shades of Sync. Hold on, I should have had this earlier pulled up, but the Shades is an acronym for. Let me see. Where's it at? Actually, let me just go to the website shadesofsync.com.
Got their website
Pull it.
already? Dang.
Yeah, at first we had it as an online event, and we got a lot of support for it, so we decided to have it stationed in Atlanta, Georgia on November 4th. It stands for Showcasing Heritage, Advocating Diversity, Elevating Sync.
Mm,
So basically we're trying to have a one-stop shop where when you get there, and within about 10 to 14 hours you're going to have everything you need to operate in sync licensing. And we're trying to just bring more awareness about the representation that's in sync licensing as far as with BIPOC creators. I think there was a survey done by Sync to Change in 2020, and the survey found that only 8% of music creators employed by sync licensing agencies and just different entities in the business, there's only 8% representation. So we need to try to change that. And so
100%.
after being on stage with you and a couple of our colleagues, including Clint, we just were like, hey, why don't we keep this going? So what we're trying to do is basically share the information, because a lot of us probably would have gotten in the sync a lot sooner if we had the access and understanding and information about how this all works. So if we can do that by going to different cities and things of that nature to at least showcase the information and give them the tools that they need. As we mentioned before, a lot of stuff that's trending is created by BIPOC musicians. So why
Hmm.
don't we try to make sure that we're involved in that process? So that's essentially what it's for.
That's awesome, man. I'm glad that you're doing that. You're right. I feel like for a lot of people who create this type of music, think that it needs to be like like it needs to be corny or like corporate, or it needs to be cheesy. But what they don't really understand is like they're looking for top quality music. The reason why you're seeing a lot of music cheesy and corporate is because you're seeing people who may work on a different genre trying to make what's trending right now on Spotify right now, for example. So
Mm-hmm.
the fact that you guys are doing that and bringing together the community and really educating and just bringing more diversity to the game, I feel like it's just going to make everything better as far as the music that's being presented, as far as the opportunities for creators looking to really create a career for themselves within sync licensing. So it's awesome that you guys are hosting that. Did you talk about the date already? What date do you? Oh, you say November 4th, yeah.
It's
And then what
November
time?
4th. Mhm. It's going to
And
be from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. It's also going to be online. It's not some cheesy Zoom thing either. We got a lot of like cool things we're going to announce pretty soon. There's also with early bird tickets right now, you're able to get access to some of the other teaching community things that myself and Clint do. So you're definitely going to have pretty much everything you need to kind of hit the ground running with sync licensing.
Nice, man. And you guys have a high success rate too, as well as far as like people who come into your communities and find success in sync. As you mentioned earlier, you had someone who, was in your community for a year and a half and then found the courage to submit and immediately got accepted. So I feel like this is a
They're
great
already
opportunity.
prepared.
Yeah, exactly. A great opportunity for anyone out there trying to get started. And then they also have a broadcast channel, which is on Instagram, that you guys can join in on as well to get updates. I'm on there as well. And I'm seeing you guys blast the updates. You have voice memos. You bring a lot of excitement around it. So something I'm definitely excited to check out. I'm probably going to have to fly out there to Atlanta to be in there
Bro,
to check it out, man, because it's looking serious.
he says that low key. I already got him down as one of the speakers.
Well,
So
I
you
didn't know if you're
have
releasing
to.
that yet, but yeah, man, like I feel like yeah, I'm definitely supporting it any way I
For
can, man.
sure.
I'm definitely behind the movie. And shout out to the fingers too, man, because he's like one of the first people who did that with the NAND panel, and that was
Hmm.
kind of his vision. And it's cool to see how that translated into what's coming out now, because there's I feel like there's a movement going on with this, and it's great. It's I feel like people of all ethnicities and races and heritage, like everything, like can find success in sync licensing. Like there's a lot of opportunity here. So I'm glad we're having more awareness around this topic, man.
For sure. For sure.
Definitely. All right, man. Well, that's the end of all the questions I got for you. I really appreciate you coming on and really sharing the gems. You shared a lot of great information, and I learned something personally speaking to you right now. So I'm glad I got to kind of pick your brain about everything too as well. So thanks for coming on. And where can people find you? I know you mentioned it a little bit earlier, but if you want to plug that again, feel free to go ahead.
Yeah, sure. First of all, again, thank you for letting me come on to the platform and be able to just kind of chop it up. I'm always it's always an exchange, bro, because I love your perspective with a lot of the things that you're doing, especially with what you're building with your sync agency. And I'll have to pick your brain later about a lot of more of that stuff. Very cool. But you can
For sure.
find all of my information under at xj_will on all platforms. If you have questions, reach out, shoot me a comment on any of my videos because I read all of them.
Nice, man. All right, man. Thank you so much, and we'll have to get you again on here after the conference too as well, and
For sure, we'll
get
do
you in
like a
touch to talk
recap.
about everything. Exactly, man. Exactly. All right, man.
Awesome. Take it easy.